Hey son and welcome to Rauta's reviews. This time we go to Sweden, figuratively speaking obviously, and this time it's about Leak. But there are a couple of bands called Leak, so this is the death metal one. Now, here it is. Necro is the name of the album, and as you can see, pretty dark and also violent. You know, there are undead hands coming out of the grave obviously, and some skulls. Well, we'll get to take another look at that. And on the background you have backside you have the track list and all that. Now let's remove the contents while I guide you through. Now this one is indeed the newer Leak from 2014, also from Sweden, like the other band, the older one from 2000s, a black metal one. But these are sometimes being confused by people despite different kind of a typing. This one is just Leak, while the other one is with capital letters L-I-K. So here it is once again with the non-glossy booklet. All the lyrics are very nice and readable. Nice as obviously death metal themes here, but that's beside the point. Then we have nicely photoshopped, I'm assuming, or are they drawn? No, neither, doesn't matter. Zombie kind of a phases of the band lineup and more lyrics for your convenience. And then recording information, lineup information, and classic thank you list. Something that you don't see too often these days when we're talking about metal albums as opposed to old school ways. Metal Archive shows you the Leak bands, and as you can see, there are two of these, and real juice, the Swedish death metal version this time obviously. So as I said, 2014 and onwards, the band has been putting out albums every few years, starting with Mass Funeral Vacation 2015, already a good album, kind of a future classic. 3 years later, with the second album, another 2 years later, you have Misanthropic Breed, and then 5 years later, Necro. You can pretty much guess how it goes. First, you have initially the ideas coming into play, and you will release album rather quickly. No demoing and all that stuff needed, obviously, because these kind of veterans know what they're doing. I'm just assuming things here, right? So don't take these as facts. That's what their interviews are for. But as you can see, the pace slows down a little bit. How is that? Now, it's not necessarily so much like lack of ideas and all that stuff. It's usually more than, bands actually get attention, they get fame, and then they start touring, and as such, the recording a new album kind of slows down. And if you're thinking what kind of death metal when we're talking about, because it's after all a Swedish one, similar artist tab gives you quite a good of indication what's going on here. For some reason unknown to me, that's really loading, but I know already what the answer is going to be. It's saying dismember of the first, and then listing some other names from Sweden as well, as like Entrails and Entombed and stuff like that. And here it is finally. Sometimes Metal Archives just lags, but as you can see, dismember, bloodbath, Entombed, Entrails, demonical, etc. Maybe not so much at the gates here, to be honest. I wouldn't call it similar. Biased even from Denmark is probably closest one, this one from the early names here, but dismember, Entombed, bloodbath, that's roughly all you need to know in terms of similarity. So what we are dealing here with is 10 tracks, about 40 minutes, give or take. My CD player was less than 40, but yeah, these times sometimes goes weird. And here's the cover once again, a pretty much better version here as opposed to what I was showing you here, because you see the colors better and the details, and I like the tune. You have this very sinister sky with, lightning bolts, and you have this tombstone hands coming from the grave and bones and skulls. Really, really beautiful, and nails what this style is all about, old school death metal. Musically, Necro takes you back to the starting point of old school Swedish death metal, even to the late 80s, but realistically we're talking about early 90s when it comes to the style, whether it's about riffs, vocals, even production to some degree. Obviously production values have changed quite a bit through the decades now. I mean, after all, Swedish death metal is more than 35 years old at this point, and obviously kind of sounds a little bit different, a little bit updated, but still clinging to the classic sound, which was known back in the days as the Sunlight sound, or HM2, referring to both HM2 pedal. Now, this classic sound is nicely executed here, so calling it Necro a little bit retro isn't in fact wrong, because technically speaking this is tapping to the old ways. Sure, you have a little bit up-tempo, but mostly around mid up-tempo rather than fast blasting, and this is the kind of a way you want to keep it going, because in fact this is basically picking up the torch where bands like Entombed left back in the days. Now, this member was also dismantled back in the days, so technically speaking, you could say, yeah, Necro, or Leak for that matter, is basically picking up those bones where these older veterans pretty much left it. So, are they doing a favor to the whole Swedish death metal scene, or are they just copycats? I would say the first one, because in fact there can never be too much classic Swedish death metal sound, if you ask me. While a lot of older bands have pretty much gone, vanished, all that stuff, Entombed for various reasons and all, and this member having been this inactivity, and not to mention bands like Grave and all. And even Vomiter is split up at some point before coming back. So yeah, there's definitely a room, kind of I would even say, kind of a need, a requirement for these kind of bands to fill the void. And so far, it has been flawless throughout the Leak discography. I mean, hey, they have 4 albums in, and every one of them, each and single one of them, have been good. Really enjoyable. So are they reinventing the wheel? Fuck no. And luckily so, because they're in fact just doing us a favors. And by us, I refer to old school death metal fanatics. We like it how it was, and we like to have it more. It's like classic food, like say pasta bolognese or whatever. You don't change the recipe too much. You keep it to the original style, and we are happy as such. Now, what can I say is about this doesn't really beat the preceding albums, goddamn, and nor it doesn't change the style. It's more like if you change it too much, some people will leave and be disappointed, and if you keep it too much the same, well, we're still happy. So what can I say is Necro is a good album, and so far one of the best albums for me in terms of year 2025. Will it last for the final battle in late December 2025, when the absolute ranking albums of the best of the year albums will be right there with top 10 lists and all? Hard to tell. Too early, since it's barely late May when I'm doing this. Now, this album has been out since April 2025, so obviously very much available, and I wouldn't be actually surprised if the guys are touring around this album and all. So, give it a go if you're an old school death metal fanatic, and even if you're a little bit shy of what's going on these days in Sweden when it comes to death metal, this is the kind of stuff you want to check it out. I'm not gonna say it's for everybody, because music rarely is, but I would say it's definitely one of the better albums of year 2025, and keeping the homage going on when it comes to old school Swedish death metal. So what are you waiting for? Start checking out the links I have provided in the description box. Go for your favorite streaming service and all that stuff, and if you like it, go buy it. Bye.